we see we have a few people here. We got Frank and we got Justice. Hello, thank you for attending. We're just a minute past 12, so we're gonna give maybe another 2 minutes and then we'll get going. How's everybody doing today? If anybody wants to introduce itself, say hi. Not mandatory, but if you feel like it.
I can get started since I was here first. My name is Amanda. It's nice to meet everyone.
I see it. Yeah. Yeah. I see
Everybody's
it.
still waking up.
I believe I saw Justice waving at you, so he says hi. It's a mouthful right now. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I'll start there. My name is Naftali, for those people that don't know me. I'm also known as Nef, N-E-F, to make it simple. I've been coaching for 6 or 7 years, and it doesn't matter if you have been coached before or not. The one thing I realized that everybody needs some work around is typically core values, because that's a foundational work. If we're not clear, really clear, and done really good work on our core values, we tend to not obtain our goals or establish goals that are not aligned with what we're wanting in life. So it's not a shocker that we end up in careers, in relationships, and many other aspects of our life that are not fulfilling. And it's because we didn't take the time to really figure out who we are, what we want, and where we're going. So I decided to create this 3-part webinar that it starts with the core values, to how to be able to figure them out without overthinking. I already did all the overthinking for you, so hopefully it will be a little bit easier. And then the second part to this 3-part series, it's next week, not next week, 2 weeks from now, Thursday, same time. So Thursday, 27th of October. And it's about how to live your values. So it's really important to be able to establish our priorities, to be able to align them with our values. And then from there, we move on to establishing SMART goals. So that's the last one, and it's on November 10th. So just a little get going over here. Again, thank you everybody for attending today. We're recording, and also it's being live streamed on Facebook. So without further ado, let me start sharing my screen, and we'll get going with, have a little presentation here for you. If I could just move this little sidebar. Let's move it over here. And then let's close all this out. I'm not needing it. Okay. So let's go in with the slideshow. Actually, I have one question for everybody, and you could type it in, or you could just what are you, what's your expectation that you want to get out of this webinar, so I can make sure that you leave this webinar gaining what you came in for. It's a hard one.
I guess I'm here really to kind of, I think, organize my thoughts, where it's I have a lot of ideas of things in my mind that are important to me and I think add value to my life, but finding a succinct way to put that is a lot harder than it seems like it would be.
Okay, thank you. Justice, if you want to type it in, or you want to share, what's the one thing that you would like to get out of this webinar? A better understanding of what priorities should be. Perfect. Great. We'll definitely cover that. Frank, if you care to share with, what would you like to get out of this webinar? And if not, it's okay. We could still move on, but want to give you opportunity. Okay. So if Frank shares it, I'll share it with you guys. But meanwhile, let's just get going. Like I said, this is a 3-part webinar. So what are you going to learn here? You're going to learn the 7 steps that I've figured out how to define your core values. This is based on past, present, and future. We're going to start going into some of the common mistakes that people do when they're establishing their core values, or just values that, and there's a difference between core values and values. So core values, it's a grouping of your values. A lot of times when we're talking about values, we could, from the top of our head, list a whole list of values. We could say we're authentic, integrity, we believe in justice, we're romantic, but that is really hard to remember. And when we have a list of 20, 30, 40, 50 core values as core values, it's not helping us. It's not helping us be able to make decisions on the spot that are aligned with who we are. That's why it's important to be able to group our values and figure out what are these core values and define them for ourselves. So again, we're going to be focusing on the past, present, and future. There's some reflective activities that I'm going to be going over. You're going to have some homework that you're going to have to be doing to be able to figure this out, because if there was that easy for me just doing it for you, it wouldn't be a challenge. The reality is you are your own world, and I'm just going to give you the tools to be able to facilitate you be able to gain that insight. So if you have any questions, I'm going to be stopping along the way so that we could answer them. What are we covering today? So we're going to cover what are your core values, the benefits of core values, common mistakes. We're going to be going over the fillable worksheet and your Google sheet. And we're going to be going into specific of the future self letter, 3 peak experiences assignment that you're going to be doing, Sona Brilliance, additional resources, and a Q&A. And then part 2, I'll talk to you a little bit about part 2 of this webinar series. So again, we kind of just covered this briefly. What are core values, right? There are identify our traits of who we are and what we're about. Why? Because we define them for ourselves. Have you ever had an instance that the scenario that always comes up in my mind is a couple, in a relationship, and they're arguing, and one is telling the other one, you don't love me because this action that you're taking does not represent love to me. The issue there is that we have not fully defined what love is, right, as a core value. So instead of us telling our partner how we see love and what it specifically defined, but if we keep broadening that definition too, right, that everything is love and a representation of that, then we're also having some issues. So with that in mind, it's important for us to really be really specific that your value of love, how do you define it versus someone else would define theirs. So I listed here some general benefits of your core values. It manages your stress and reduces it, right? It improves decision-making and problem-solving skills. Why? Because you're more clear of who you are. It inspires healthier habits. This makes sense, right? When you're really clear of who you are, you're going to remove the triggers and things that are not so much in alignment with yourself. So you're going to seek better habits in your life. It enhances your willpower and determination to follow through. Again, another really important aspect, because this is why we fail a lot of times at being able to establish goals and to follow them through, because we haven't defined those core values. It increases your assertiveness. When you know who you are and where you're going, you don't feel that shame and guilt as much to say, no, thank you. Maybe not this time, right? People pleasers, perfectionism, all these other aspects kind of kick in, these saboteurs. But when we're clear of our core values, we could stand in that power and be able to show up for ourselves easier. They promote compassion. When you are clear of who you are, you also have a better understanding to allow other people to be themselves, and you find compassion in that. You're wiser at making career and life and work choices. It bolsters your confidence and it creates intimacy, right? When you're clear again of that aspects of yourself, your sensitivities, of your strengths, then you could share that openly with the world. You can embody it, and that creates intimacy. Common mistakes. Too many on group values, like we already mentioned. If you have a list of 20, 30 values, you're not doing anything with that. They're undefined. You haven't sat down and specifically named the group and also established its definition. They're past focus. A lot of times we always look to the past to be able to define our future. That's a problem. You have aspects of yourself that are bringing forward. By age of 5, we have already defined our values. So it's good to look back, but also it's good to look into the future. Who do you want to become? What values do you want to continue to bring with you? When you're confusing your core values for your life priorities or life pillars, meaning some people that say spirituality could be a core value. But for instance, for me, that's a life pillar. That's a priority in my life that I keep it separate, just like community. Family could be a core value, but family for some people is so important that it's just as a big aspect as work, relationship, right? So understanding that difference and how do you define it? And it changes person per person. Not enough values to work with, right? Some people can't think of, you ask them, tell me 10 things about you, and they could only come up with 5. Biased determination of core values, right? And this aspect of this bullet number 6 is important because we're going to also incorporate other people in this process for you so that your results are not biased. Low self-esteem hinders discernment of self, right? That kind of ties in almost to bullet 5 of your self-esteem. Just, you can't get yourself to think beyond what are you, how good are you in the world, and what do you bring? Lack of accountability partners to help define core values, and inability to see yourself as whole and resourceful, right? When you see yourself as broken, it's doing this type of work, it's probably really challenging. Okay, there's 2 resources that I'm going to be providing. It's going to be a Google Sheet that we're going to be using. I'm going to be working through it so you could see it. Not everybody's comfortable with the Google Sheets. I understand that. So there's a fillable worksheet also that step-by-step you're going to be doing. Here are the links. I'm going to share them with you guys. You don't have to worry about that. And now let's talk a little bit about our future self letter. Or wait, let's actually go into the worksheet itself on Google Sheets so that you could see an example. And then I'm going to walk you through every step of how you're going to fill in the blanks for yourself. This is my own core values that I figured out. Future self letter. It's a letter that you're going to write to yourself 3 years into the future. So you're going to establish a date, and then you're going to be looking at, these are prompt questions that I provide you in both the Google Sheets and in the fillable worksheet. What lessons have you learned so far? What is important to me? Am I living life truly to myself, right? Am I spending enough time with what matters? You want to sit in a place that you're going to be able to have, quiet and peace, and you're going to have a journal or a piece of paper, or if you want to do it on your computer, that's fine. But I prefer for you to not do it with any technology, because there is studies that show that when we use pen and paper, our minds are capable of like accessing parts that we normally don't, and also we retain more information. So that's one aspect. And also you won't have any distractions. The computer still might be tied to your phone and other aspects that will distract you from the work. Schedule this. Pick a day on your calendar and you schedule this. You could do this early morning, sit down with tea and do some journaling. And you have these questions in front of you. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to like look into the future and see yourself. We learn through emotions. And because we learn through emotions, the more that we're capable of creating an emotion that excites us, the more motivation we're going to have of creating that future. But also, that's what I want to see. When that letter is done, from that place, that it's clear what values you want to promote in your life moving forward. So going back to the Google Sheet over here, this is my future self letter, right? I wrote it in November 3rd of last year. I dated it 2020-24, and you could write it whatever tone you need, right? Like I'm speaking to myself like, hi, love, I'm writing to you from the future. I'm so proud of you. I'm accomplished, yada, yada, yada. The point is that you want to tap into that, right? And if you're big on meditation, this is a great exercise to you to meditate on. That's future self letter. Any questions about this or anything that we covered so far? Okay, awesome. So future self letter, then we're moving into your step 2, which is your peak experiences. In this Google Sheet also, by the way, all the instructions are laid out on top, just similar to the worksheet that I will provide, the fillable worksheet. So on peak experience, you're gonna do a little bit of math. It's not too complex, but you're going to take your age and you're going to subtract 7, and you're going to divide that result in 3. That age range, it's going to be 7 plus the age range is going to be your first age group. So, for example, if I'm at this point, I was 36 when I did this exercise. My age groups ended up being 7 through 16, 17 through 26, and 27 through 37. Right? So that's a little age group there. You could see that I placed it there. Then you're going to be thinking about a moment that was so pivotal in that age group for you that essentially changed your life. Moment that it could be something, it could be, people always ask me, can it be a sad story? Because like sometimes we grow through those moments, right? Like, and I'm like, it could be anything. The point being is that you have a stark distinction this day, before this day, and after this day. I feel like I started to evolve into a different person. So for me, it was excelling in 6th grade. That was the first age group. The second one was when I moved to California. That was a really big, impactful change in my life. And then the last one is becoming 30. Those 3 are like milestones in my life. When I think about them, I think about specific time frames. So then I go in and I want to write about those. I want to journal about why was that moment so important to me? Why was it so impactful? The more that you're capable of writing out and like, going into the senses and the feelings of what was it you were experiencing that time, the better you're going to be able to gain your core values, your values from this exercise. That's what we're doing, right? So this is, again, the future with the future self letter. We're looking at the past from the experiences that actually have molded you into who you are. And then from there, we're looking at step 3 that we're going to be moving into your your zone of brilliance. So your zone of brilliance is where you want to be able to bring people in. This is how we eliminate the biasness of you just searching for your own core values in some ways. So at this point, you're going to ask 5 people closest to you, the 5 people that you think that better understand who you are at your core. And you're going to ask them to provide you with 1 word to describe you. This, for a lot of people, might be something really challenging, and they might end up giving you multiple qualities about you. That's okay. Take them all, and you're going to use them to input the values that you have in step 3. So these are mine. At the time that I did this, I had asked my friends for more than one, and like I think two or three, and I ended up getting way more than that. And I ended up, you know, having this little table here full of qualities that people were describing about me. So you're going to go ahead and put them all there and gather them. Step 4 is assessments. This is more optional. This is for similar people like I am that love personality assessments, Myers-Briggs, high sensitivity, high sensation seeking. You could also take love languages. All of those tests say things about you. So like, for example, if you take Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFJ. E means extroverted. So that's a quality in me, right? N means intuitive. So I'm intuitive. I'm a feeler. I'm structured. The J means structured. I'm a high sensation seeker, and I'm a highly sensitive person. All those things are innate traits that are in me. So those are important to bring up as values. So now we have 4 aspects that we have a better understanding and a better like full like picture of our values. We have the past, we have the future, we have the present through people in your life, and we also have the personality assessments. Now we're eliminating all the bias that we might have just inputted through us just picking our values. There could be a lot of error in that, right? So when we're doing that, this is when it starts getting a little bit more, this is where the second part of this assignment gets a little trickier, because you're going to need somebody else to help you with this. If you get an accountability partner to be able to do this, you could send them your future self letter, and you could send them your peak experiences and ask them to read through it and find the values that they could identify in it. Right? When you're working with a coach, it's much easier, right? Like I do this for my clients, so I'm capable of doing it for myself, but because I know what I'm looking for. But most people on their own are going to have some level of difficulty trying to find their own values. So, for example, when I went to my story of my future self letter, one of the things that I noticed was I'm a storyteller. The way that I wrote it was like a little bit of a storytelling, right? Some of the words that I even use in the language of writing that story was I was proud, I was accomplished, collaborative, team player. All these things I was able to pull from something that I wrote of who I want to be in the future. Having an accountability partner, they will be able to see aspects of yourself that, especially when you're looking at peak experiences, if it's something that might have been a hardship in your life, an experience that feels heavy, and you can't see other than the downside of that experience as like life happened to you, giving this to your accountability partners, they'll be able to really show you the other side of this, that they might be able to see resiliency. They might be able to see you're an underdog. They might be able to see all these other aspects of qualities that if not, you would have missed. So having an accountability partner for this, it's really a great practice. I really encourage it. You could always end up doing it yourself and then possibly giving it to your accountability partners, and you could see what other values were you missing. And you could get curious. You could ask them directly, like, why did you pick this one, this value of resiliency? I didn't see it there. When we pull all the values, now we have the values in step 5 for future self letter. We have them for peak experiences for all 3 stories. We have them for your assessments, and we have them for your zone of brilliance, right? That the ones that people are giving you. How we're doing so far, everybody following? Any questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go.
Um, so the actually, first I would like to thank you for this. I'm here because of Rob.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
um, Rob really enjoyed his whole life coaching thing with you. And he's like, "Do you want to, you know?" Yesterday, so that's why I'm here. But
Awesome.
as for the accountability partner thing, how does that everything that you're doing here?
Sorry, you cut out for a moment.
Oh, sorry. I meant to ask. So we fill out this worksheet, and then for the accountability partners, do we show them all this stuff too?
So for the accountability partners, in a ways, sometimes when you give too much information, people could tend to overthink it. Or so what I would suggest is just give them one simple task. That is, you give them your peak experiences and you give them your future self letter. And you ask them to identify, to create lists separately, right, for each of the values that they find. Because if you do that, then they don't need to know the purpose until they do it. It'll be better, it'll be more effective, because if they know the end game, they might influence the result based off of what they think you want to hear. Versus, hey, can you do this like little exercise? Can you verify? And what do you gain from this? Like, what can you gain from like what values are here? And from there, then you could populate this list here. And I would say, I would also encourage you for you to also glance over it, because there'll be a learning curve for you too, when how you see yourself and how other people are reading this, and then how similar is it, or how much more of a mismatch. And if it's very different and you're missing a lot of values, then that's kind of telling, because it means that you might not be seeing the full picture with yourself. You might not be giving yourself the full uh credit on some aspects, right? You might be seeing the glass half empty. So did that kind of answer? Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions, anybody, or before I continue? Thank you for the question, by the way. I love questions, so bring them on. Okay, so step six, we're going to be looking at, now we're trying to create groupings. This tends to be a little bit challenging because it has to do with how you associate these values. It doesn't have to do so much of what you think they mean and where they should be placed. So this is going to be very tied to how you view yourself in these aspects, right? So you start off, the way that I would start off is like, you have all these lists of values, right? Like at this point, I think these are like 50 of them. I've left a lot of room here so that you could really create a string of values. You could always add more cells if you need to. The more the merrier. You start with group A. So I would just go, let's say at this point, from Zone of Brilliance, and I would start, actually, I could just do a little bit of this because tends to be a little bit more on the complex end. So let's say I associate group A, it's going to be leader. Do I associate me being charismatic with my leadership skills? I believe so. Dependable. Okay. Yeah, I would say that still could be leadership. Capable, that's kind of like almost the same word than dependable, right? Resilient. Okay. For me, resiliency, it's a different category. I see that as a different value of mine, and almost I have more importance. I add a lot of value to resiliency. Visionary, that to me also is a separate category. Inspirational, that kind of goes along with visionary. Daring, that would go there too. Spiritual, that to me is a separate category. Funny, I associate that more with my spirituality, right? Like when I'm doing the work on myself, I could be able to be lighter and more playful, authoritative. That to me is also associated to group A. And we start moving through all of these one by one. And then the other really important aspect of this, that as we're like filling up these groups, I've limited them only up to group G, which is a maximum of 7 core values. Why? Because if you have more than that, it's just too hard to remember. And you don't want a whole list of values. You want to be able to narrow it down to the ones that are clearly the ones that have most importance. And the other thing you want to be doing here is you want to be like comparing one against another. So once you've been able to figure out these groups, group A, B, and C, and D, you want to be able to say, what is the value of most importance here? And put them in and sort them through order. Is it leadership, charismatic, dependable, capable, authoritative? Out of all those, I'm like, okay, yeah, leadership is the first one for me. Charismatic, dependable, authoritative. That one actually falls in the exact order that I would probably leave it. But if I'm going back to what was there before, I did that for each one of my values. So I thought through what is the most important value in this entire string of values. And I ended up like realizing, right, like how this is really interesting too, because when it's critical thinking skill, when you're doing this level of critical thinking on yourself, you're starting to understand what is more important, even within your own value system. You're starting to really put that amount of interest into yourself, right? So I ended up having authentic, visionary, playful, underdog, altruistic, and romantic as my top core values. And then you could see which ones would be my second ones, right? Playful is good. It comes with curious, individualization, which that is a word from Clifton Strengths Finders, from one of the assessments. Inquisitive, generous, learner. You could start seeing patterns, right? You could start seeing how I see the world. I associate play with a lot of like mental stimulation of seeking stimulation, and also and curiosity, right? That could be different for you. And that's what we want to see in these values. We want to be able to, when we're going to label, the next step is going to be labeling that value. We want to be really clear on what it means for us. So when we're going down to the next step, that I decided to just leave that first value that I was able to figure out as the primary one of that group as the name of that group. But you can name them entirely different. You could put a name on it that'd be easier for you to remember. But I figure for me, it would work out if I just left it that way. And I also, if you notice, I didn't have to use a 7th group. I ended up only using 6. This takes a while, but it's a very extreme, like good exercise of reflective thinking that by the point that you're done with this, you will remember those 6 values. So it's effective in that sense. When then we're basically getting at this point that the definition in step 7 is, how could you define for yourself your core value without using any of the descriptors in the group? So if authentic for me means charismatic, win people over, positivity, storyteller, confident. What is the essence of that? And how do I try not to use other values to describe in a sentence, in a simple sentence, what is my core value of authentic is? So my natural extroverted state in which I show up in the world, right? That is for me the definition of how I define authenticity. Why would I put the word extroverted? Because a lot of times, I could tend to be able to chameleon myself into other forms to be able to through work or whatever it's needed. But in the really authentic self is I'm very social, right? So it's important for me to honor that and to be able to say, when you're not pretending to be anybody else, that you're talking when you want to talk, or you're whatever you're doing, or laughing loud, or whatever it is, that is truly your innate nature, right? Anything else kind of deviates a little bit, and we all have different parts of ourselves that show up differently in different times. That's okay. Playful, for example, when I look back of what playful means, right? It goes back to curious, individualization, inquisitive, generous. There's a lot there that has to do with, there's the word innocence, there's joy, right? There's this place of innate place. And I decided to label that, the definition of it, as my inner child. It felt like the easiest thing that I could do to remember, how am I playful? My inner child is. So this is the process that you're going to do for each one of these. Again, trying not to use words and values that are already in the groups. Once you do that, I would say you kind of like just leave it, sit with it, and you could always come back and revise it. But this is the best way that you could bulletproof for all those mistakes that typically we have, and the bias of when we're trying to figure out our core values, right? This is the aspects of, we could eliminate all of these if we follow these steps. It's a little extensive, but it's very rewarding, and you have this for life, right? When you're doing a cover letter, a resume, and whatever you're doing, you need to be looking at the lens of, through your values. One of my coachee in training, he wrote his bio, and my only feedback to him back was, look at your value system. Does it match with what you wrote? Okay, cool. If it does, then you wrote it right. It's not for me to say if it's right or wrong. It's more of like, is it in authenticity to who you are? And that's what matters. So any questions of that process before I continue?
Okay, just to like clarify, so going back a little bit to like the different areas just above step 6, I think it's where it's like where it's from the, yeah, so step 3 is the brilliance values. Those are things that come from other people.
That's the value.
Okay.
So that's the word that you're asking to be described by.
Okay. And then step 4, assessment values. So those are the values that I pick up from like the personality tests and stuff like that, like from my own self-description. And then step 5, those are gleaned after I've written my letters to self.
Exactly. You went, you gathered those, and also you used an accountability partner to be able to gather, help you gather additional values.
Okay. Yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah. So from step 3 to 5 is where then you're basically stringing them together into groups.
Okay.
And you're moving them around, and this is why I like to use the spreadsheet, because you could move around words versus on the worksheet you would literally have to go and change it. But
it's very separated in.
Yeah. But it also works out that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Let me show you what the worksheet looks like. It's over here. I'm going to send these resources out so that everybody could have them. So here you have all the prompt questions to start with your future self letter. Oh, oops. Let's just download it to open it, make it easier. So it's automated, so you could just type right in there. This is the peak experiences. This one is a little bit, it might be a little bit easier to process, to digest, and then maybe move it onto the Google Sheets. But it has the math, it has the example of the math of how to be able to get your groups, the ages. It has a space here of like, the prompt questions. What did you experience in this time? What did you learn from it? The peak experience 1. you have peak experience 2 and 3. And then here you have the strengths, right? The descriptor that you're seeking from your accountability partners for the zone of brilliance. So you're looking for 5. So I have left a little space there for 5 people that you ask. And then this is the assessment part. This is like, again, not mandatory, but it's really helpful. So I put there, I list out all the assessments that I suggest that you could take. Myers-Briggs, love languages, high sensation seeking, HSPs, which is high sensitive people, Clifton Strength Finders. That's a really great one for everybody that's looking to do any career change. That one gives you your top 5 strengths, main strengths. That one is, I love that test, to be honest. You have to pay for it though. That's the only downside, but it's like $19.95. So you put your strengths in there. And then this is the part, this page. So essentially you could take this page and you could give this to your accountability partners with your stories. And you could say, hey, fill in this. And they would read your future self letter and they would give you the values. They would input them here. The same thing with the peak experience 1, 2, and 3. So just as this was like, maybe this is probably the easiest way for you gathering what you need. And then over here, you're doing the groups, right? So you're taking this previous steps and you're inputting them here. Same process. You're going to create them, put them in order. And then you're going to name each group and you're going to define it. So, Amanda, I saw you like, whoo, it's a lot of work. And here's a list for those of us that sometimes like lack a little creativity beyond maybe 20 words. It's when I get stuck and I'm like, what else is out there? There is a whole list of all the values that you could have, and there's probably plenty more out there, but this should probably be good enough. So my suggestion is try to have, the more values you have, the better, the more clear your core value is going to become, and more inclusive. So somewhere between 30 to 40 values is probably a sweet spot for you to be able to work with. You don't have to have all 7. You could have 4, you could have 4, 5, 6, whatever feels right. It needs to make sense for you. It's the most important part. That's the biggest takeaway I want you to take from here. Some helpful tips for Zone of Brilliance. First step is just to create a list of 5 people. And then you just create a text or a little email that a draft. And when you're ready, you just send it out. It's the easiest way. You could divide that in 2 steps. So that way it feels less overwhelming. I know that that's also someplace a little bit vulnerable sometimes for some people to ask somebody else, be like, could you describe me in 1 word? And, give me my eulogy now. I recommend doing this while you're journaling. For peak experiences and future self letter, when you're meditating, it's a great examples for that. Some additional resources. There's this TED Talk. I loved her. Heard a TED Talk. She talks about percentages and what age we develop our core values. It's really great. There's a podcast for those people that like podcasts, how to set priorities, and there's a book. It turns out that Mr. Vishen Lakhiani, I give him credit, The Buddha and the Badass. It's a great book. He's an engineer too. I'm an engineer, my background. And somehow I've pieced this together through different modalities I've seen, and it's my own way of doing this. The closest thing out there that I've seen without copying it was his. And I read through it and I was like, oh my God, this guy like literally step by step did the same thing. And I was like, well, it makes sense. He's an engineer, thinks the same way, I guess. So, instead of being angry at him, I'm just like, you know what, give him credit. It's a great book and it walks you through these steps. It's like the first 3 chapters are about this process. So if there's a book with 3 chapters, so it takes a little bit to be able to figure this out, but it's a great tool. So I definitely suggest doing it. It's a fun read. And then Brooke Castillo is a great resource. One day I'm going to send her a check to just as a thank you because she's coached me a million times on her podcast, and I have gained so much value from her. So that's that. Any questions about anything that we covered today? Okay. I can't. You're
Actually,
Go
I
for
was raising my hand.
Go for it.
um, thanks for the resources. And I love Castillo too. The is time frame that we should kind of aim to finish at least like like the first part, second part, just kind of it's like because I'm not a very organized person.
Yeah, good question. So ideally, if so I have there, I'm going to talk about the second part of this, which is the process keeps going but so if you could have it ready for 2 weeks, it'll be great, because you'll be at a great endpoint to be able to start the next segment of it. If not, it's not a big deal. You could still do the webinar after if you decide to or not. But what I would suggest is this should be probably like a 2-week process, and giving yourself, it depends how good you are at tapping into yourself and comfortable writing. If you journal already, it comes easier. But the future self letter, that is probably, think about it in 3 drafts. You write it once, you walk away, then you come back and you revise it, and then you revise it 1/3 time. Then from there you have it ready. The peak experiences, it might be just in one sitting. You could write for each one of them. So if you give yourself, let's say, over a period of 3 days of revising your future self letter, that's 3 days plus 3 peak experiences, that makes it 6. You could ask for the zone of brilliance, which I should point here instead of just mentioning what they are. Right, so count on this 3 days. These over here, 1 day per each, to make it simple. So just so like you sit down, you meditate, you journal. Zone of brilliance, you could ask for that quality starting today. You could just immediately ask your friends for those 5 qualities. The assessments will probably be another day. So let's say that's 7 days already. So first week, just gather all the information. And then the second week would be to do step 5. You would send that to your accountability partners. You want to give yourself at least give them a turnaround of 2-3 days. Now you have 4 days left. And at those 4 days, now you're basically doing step 6 and 7, which that could be a few days of iterations of coming back until you're comfortable with, yep, this makes sense for me. So it's once I lay it out, and you asked me, I never had that question asked that way. I'm like, I realize it's an extensive process. But don't do anything simple. It's what my friends say. You don't do anything simple.
But you said that the next meeting is in 2 weeks, right?
The next webinar, yes. So let me talk about that. What the next webinar is. So this is a 3-part series, what I'm calling the Unapologetic Life. And you just learned how to be able to establish your core values. I gave you everything you need so that you could, at the end of this, have 5 to 7 core values established and clear. The next step is teaching you how to be able to make sure that you're living in alignment to your core values. And how we do that is by, now I'm going to help you establish your priorities in life. And when we establish those main aspects that are priorities, we're capable of then looking at them and contrasting them with your core values. And then you could ask, instead of saying, I hate my job, then you'll have language to say, my job does not fulfill my value of integrity. And you could say from 1 to 10, it's a 6. And that's where I'm struggling. And you could get really down to the nitty gritty. What are the problems? And I could show you like a little glimpse of, there's another spreadsheet, of course, because I love spreadsheets. Let me open up here so you could see what the next step kind of looks like. So life pillars. So in this one, you'll be doing a set of defining again. You're going to be able to define all your pillars, the subcategories of that. You're going to rate them. And then these are all the values that they're already automatically pulled from the last spreadsheet, from the previous one, right? From mine. And now I'm comparing them against each one. And the best part of this is that you get to see the difference. And a lot of people are off a lot of times by a point or two from how they just look at their career versus when they look at their career against each value, they might be able to realize like, oh, I might have a pessimistic like outlook on life. And this starts to help critical thinking and discernment of how we're looking at ourselves. But we learn that through doing it, right? So that's how we're catching ourselves. So by forcing you to do this type of critical thinking, you're just becoming more aware, more cognizant, and then getting more clear what the problem exactly is. The final step of this that I'll be covering in 2 weeks, if you tell me that your business versus your life pillar of business versus your core value of authenticity is a 7, I'm going to ask you to define it. I'm like, well, what makes it a 7? And then I'm going to tell you, well, what makes it an 8? What makes it a 9, a 10, right? Like, tell me how to define this in a way that's going to be beneficial to you, that we could then go and talk about the last part of this series, 3-part series, is how to establish SMART goals with ease. Because now you've laid out everything of where you are in life, what matters to you, and you created a ladder of how to improve it. But you can't improve everything at once, right? So then from there, we start deciding what priorities are you going to establish, specific, measurable, attainable, time-bound, and relevant goals. And then you move into what we look at here. This is the last one of my 3-part series. And we're establishing goals here. And we delineate the next steps. So when you do this, clients always hit somewhere between 80 to 85% of their goals in the first like 3 months. And it's because that's the only way that you could bulletproof that they're smart. If you don't do the core work, if you don't do the life pillar work, you can't get to this aspect. And the goal that you're probably establishing doesn't really matter to you as much. It's not as relevant. So that webinar is going to be on the 27th of this month. And that's a mistake. Actually, I wrote there today. That needs to correct that. But yes, so ignore that part there, but it's October 27th. I'm going to send links so everybody can sign up, whoever wants. Please share with whoever desires this and additional resources. Remember that this is recorded. So I'm also going to send out links so you could have this. You could go over this as you're doing it yourself. You remember you have a committee accountability partners. So this is also something that I could offer up to you guys. I could put you guys in contact with each other in case you want to just share your future self letters and peak experiences and gain from there. So if that's something that interests you guys, just could let me know and I'll happily do that. And remember that I'm here to support you through email and texting for anything that's related to this and as I can. And then finally, if you need additional support, maybe a session, I'm giving a discounted session for 157. There's their information there. If you're a person that likes to learn on your own, I have a whole program. It's a 12-week program from beginning to end, how to establish healthy boundaries in your life, the habits that you want through core values. This is there, the life pillars, goals, procrastination, everything you can imagine of adulting 101 and that we didn't learn in college. I've created a program for that and I'm giving a 20% discount today. It has an app, so it's also easy to use. video, fillable worksheets, everything. And then if you are interested in coaching, you want to experience what that is for 3 months, I also have a coaching package for that. And the difference is that if you sign up now, I also will give you the access to my career and life jumpstart program as a bonus. So any questions? Final question, comments? Any, as a good coach, I'm going to ask one question, and is, what are the obstacles that you foresee when you're going to try to do this, establish these core values on your own?
My inner saboteur.
Okay. Tell me
Yeah.
more. Tell me more. What about the inner saboteur?
I mean, I am aware that there are multiple facets of myself. But it's always the kind of like the core self that's, like one of my is um it's protected me for a lot of years, but also, and I'm aware of it, but it's the part that's like, nah, you're not going to get anything by doing this, so just, don't bother. And I know I need to talk to that part of me and make sure that it is calmed down and put away.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of agree with that. Like, it's definitely requires like a lot of vulnerability, like even with the people I care about, even just like, I mean, because we were doing the coaching and we talked a little bit about this at the very beginning, just reaching out to people who are my friends and who have been coworkers and saying like, hey, like, can you do this thing? Like, it's in my logic brain, I'm like, this is not a big ask, but in like my emotional brain, I'm like, oh my God, they're not gonna be able to say like a nice thing about me, even though I know it's like my best friends. But so yeah, and then I think really digging deeper into those like the critical moments from the past, like that's gonna bring up some stuff that I'm gonna have to deal with. So it's a little scary.
Okay. Okay, so thank you both for, so saboteurs, right? So when you're going into this, and that voice comes up and it wants to do its job of trying to keep you safe, don't get, don't get entangled with it. Instead, get curious. Treat that voice like if it was your 5-year-old. If your 5-year-old didn't want to do something and it's telling you, mommy, daddy, like, no, like whatever the story is telling you, how could you have compassion? How could you show up as your inner parent to be able to not push away what it's telling you, but take it as, okay, I'm hearing you, but as, how could you put him at ease in a way that he feels or she feels heard and held space, but you still accomplish what you need to accomplish? Okay. Scheduling also helps. Justin, you had asked a lot about the time frame and other stuff. If you go ahead and you just make those steps and you put them in your calendar and you include them in your day, there's a likelihood of you doing that is increases by like 80%. It's high. So it's one of those things of breaking things down. If you just leave this and you have to come back to it, you won't do it. It's too much. Think you have a comment, Justice?
Oh no, I was just gonna say that, yeah, that's what I've actually been doing, putting stuff into my calendar. Like even mundane things like go out for a walk, because if not, I'm not gonna do it. So it's just kind of like I know I follow my schedule, so at least I try to. So yeah.
Okay, well, awesome. Well, you guys have been really great to connecting with. Thank you so much. This was my first live webinar, and thank you for attending. You will be receiving a follow-up email with all the resources that I laid out here, a link to be able to sign up for the next one. And also, feedback. If you guys could provide feedback, that'll be amazing, because I grow through feedback, and I'm here to service you guys and everybody else. And if you need any help, please don't hesitate in reaching out. Email me, text me, whatever it is. I'm here to help. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naftali.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.